Hi, I'm Pamela Monroe, and I'm here today with Dr. Justin Panic.
Hello.
There. He is an ecotherapist and our counselor, or otherwise known as nature-based therapist. And so I'm going to talk to him more about that today. It's a very interesting way of working with people, and I think very necessary these days. So I'll introduce you. Here's Dr. Panic.
Good afternoon. Hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to be talking about nature-based therapy and what that entails. And so my original interest was in connecting people to nature because from what I had researched and understood was that our lack of connection to nature it forms the basis of a lot of psychological disorders, anxiety, depression, addiction, things of that nature. And what we find often is that when we are in the forest, we go out on hikes, we start to reconnect to nature, and usually something kind of nice begins to happen, right? We relax a little bit, we get in tune with our bodies, we slow down. And it tends to kind of fill a void that we otherwise might fill with drugs and alcohol or whatever. So that was my original interest, but there are very few ecotherapy programs out there. So I took a traditional track and studied health psychology, and was going to pursue a normal sort of counseling career when I had the opportunity to discover a place in Canby, Oregon, a very unique place that's a ecotherapy farm, and it's 70 acres, and it's beautiful. And so on this farm we have lots of places to walk, and we have horses, so we also do equine therapy. And of course animals, our interaction with animals is very therapeutic, especially horses, and we have all kinds of animals. So anyway, what I've found in my practice so far is that nature is kind of a co-therapist in a way. And I find that nature does a lot of the work for me because it helps to relax people. People are in the moment. We can do gardening and trailblazing and fire starting and building and all that. And what I find too is that often when we're in nature we find metaphors. And metaphors are just kind of unique ways of looking at our lives and the various issues that we have. So again, nature is there as kind of as a guide for all of us, as a therapist and as a and for clients. So yeah, it's very unique, and there aren't very many programs out there like that. It's kind of become the talk of the town because there's so many success stories with this approach. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit more about why it stands out from just regular therapy, just coming into an office?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, that's a good question. Actually, a lot of the therapists, the staff who come to Heron Hill are just excited. And in fact, we've gotten a couple new people recently, and they're like, it's like their dream job, you know? So, and often it's like, oh, I don't have to be stuck in an office all week. And it's the same thing for the clients, you know? It's, especially for the young clients, they can run around, and, you know, it's particularly good for those children who have attention deficit disorder issues and a lot of anxiety and things like that. It's really a way to help people engage more and to be active and to get in their bodies. What I found is that a lot of the approaches that I use, a nature-based model fits very well into some of those approaches. So for example, existential therapy involves a lot of symbolism and things of that nature. So we often find metaphors in nature.
Like what? Could you give me an example?
Yeah, so let's see, I was with a client once, and that client got stuck in the mud. And I was like, that's kind of interesting. That reminds me of your situation, in which you feel like maybe you're kind of stuck in the mud, and how do we get out of the mud? Maybe I could help you, right? So it brought up this this idea that it's important to reach out for help, that you can't do everything by yourself. And so what it does is it opens up all these doors that we otherwise maybe wouldn't have gotten to in a normal counseling session. So what I find is that it just becomes more open-ended and allows for more doors to be opened and more areas to explore. Just like you go exploring in nature, it's a way to kind of explore yourself. And that's what nature is all about, is not only exploring the environment, but self-exploration as well.
Hello. And so, I know, have you seen that book, Last Child in the Woods? Have you ever read that book?
No, I haven't.
It's all about how everything's pavement and how kids don't get a chance. Everything's paved, so they don't get out in the woods very much and connect with nature.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such an important way for them to process.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I do have a lot of clients who they live in small apartments, and there might be, let's say, like 2 or 3 kids in their in an apartment, so they don't get a lot of opportunities to just run around and kind of burn that energy. And it's pretty apparent when they come to Heron Hill. They start running around, and what I've noticed is that they're a little more at ease, right? So when they don't get that opportunity, and they're just kind of stuck in this sort of urban jungle, all that energy that needs to be expelled is just pent up, and it creates a lot of anxiety and attention deficit issues and all kinds of things. So in a way, using the nature-based approach, it allows for that energy to be released, so then we can actually do important work. Otherwise, if you're in an office setting, they're still going to have that intense energy, so it's going to take a lot longer to get through some of those issues, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And also there's a lot of activities that we can set up to, gardening and trailblazing, and what begins to happen is clients, they kind of become like stewards of the environment. They become truly connected to the environment, and they also take on activities, and being outside makes them happy, and so when they start taking on these tasks, they develop a sense of ownership, and that really helps with their identity development.
Like what kind of tasks?
So one example would be shelter building. I've done that with a couple of clients where it might be, let's say it's raining outside, so we're like, okay, well, let's build a shelter, and then let's gather some firewood, and sometimes we do primitive fire building. So we use like a bow, a fire bow or bow saw. And so we learn how to build fires, things like that.
So, while you're doing this, are you just focusing on those tasks, or are you kind of taking the walls down, so to speak?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. So sometimes we, I might spend 3 or 4 sessions just focusing on tasks. And while I'm doing that, I'm developing a bond with that person. So that's one of the most important things, is the relationship. And I think being in a nature-based environment facilitates that, because it's open-ended, it's relaxing, and so it allows just a little more flexibility in the interaction. So I might have them just focus on tasks, and then in the next session we'll talk about that. So, what was that like for you, and how can you incorporate that into some other areas of your life? And because a lot of times some of these kids that I work with don't have a lot of opportunities for for ownership and taking initiative, and some of those things are really critical to their development. And if they don't have those opportunities, it's going to negatively impact their development. Yeah.
So, as you build these things with them and create this bond, so it's actually exemplifying building a healthy relationship.
Right.
So, do you see changes in them with their other relationships that you are involved with or know of?
Yeah. So one example is, I think, so task built, doing tasks, for example, when they are able to do something that they normally thought they wouldn't be able to do, whether it's building a shelter or making a fire, without using matches or whatever, it gives them confidence. And many clients may have difficulty in the social domains, building relationships and things like that. So I have found that some clients are able to better foster healthy relationships, whether it's having the confidence to speak out. Another example actually is I mentioned before, we work with animals. In particular, we work with horses. And the horses are great because they can teach us a lot about social cues, right? So horses communicate, their brain is basically their body. They have this amazing nervous system, and all of their communication is based on their bodily cues. Like, they might pin their ears back or move their leg or do this. And so when we work with the horse, we have them really focus on what the horse is doing. What is it thinking about? Right? So what happens then is they start to focus in on social cues. And the other thing is boundary issues. Many clients might have difficulties with boundaries, or not being able to assert themselves. So I might have a client try to lead a horse through an obstacle course, and they have some difficulty with that. But with some prompting, they're eventually able to kind of be assertive, and then they see immediate feedback, right? So there have been quite a few situations where I've had clients that have become more assertive. They've been able to kind of set boundaries for themselves and just be more confident. And that helps to foster healthy relationships.
Really.